All right, guys, we are back with the Ascend podcast. This is episode 3, and today I have Coach Tristan on the call with me, and then we also have special guest, Ascend athlete Kelly Baker.
Hi.
Hey.
So Kelly is one of our athletes. Last year, she was on our games team that qualified out of CrossFit Greater Heights. And she's been doing CrossFit for some time. And today we're just going to catch up with her, talk about some of her goals for the 2023 season, a little bit of her background, and just get to know her better overall. So the first place I'm going to start is we'll talk to you, Kel, and let's get like your 3-minute elevator speech of just who Kelly Baker is, just some details of kind of you personally outside of CrossFit.
Okay. So I'm originally from the Northeast, so Philadelphia, New Jersey area. I grew up playing sports, played college soccer, and then right after that started to get, my feet wet into CrossFit, but actually, met some people right away that wanted to be competitive and were looking for the last spot on a team. So I was super fortunate that I was kind of thrown in with the wolves from the very beginning and I was kind of forced to get good quick. And, my first year competing, we luckily qualified for the games, and that was back in 2016. So ever since then, I've just kind of been CrossFit and, in terms of like career-wise, I was a teacher for 7 years. And then I met my fiance in Philadelphia when he was doing his fellowship. And we kind of took the leap and moved to Texas together because he had taken a job here. So we've been in Houston for a year and change. And I ended up quitting my teaching job, going full-time with Black Iron Nutrition. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
You mentioned one really big thing, fiance, that you have coming up.
Yes, I know. I probably should have started with that. People would have been like, that should be your number one. So we're getting married in about 2.5 weeks, which is exciting and a little stressful at this time, just with last minute things I need to do. But yeah, so we're getting married in Houston as well. So it's going to be fun having family come up for Thanksgiving. And then right after Thanksgiving is the wedding festivities, and people are staying a little bit longer. So that'll be fun.
That's exciting. In a second here, we're going to kind of get into what the 2023 season looks like. But kind of long story short, before we get there, Tristan is serving as your one-on-one coach through Ascend. So I have Tristan on podcast too. And we'll kind of dig into that and what that's going to look like. But how did this, let's start here with Tristan a little bit. How did this start? How did you guys meet each other and kind of start working together as far as Ascend is concerned?
Yeah, so I helped out a decent bit with the team's preparation last year, mostly in terms of the programming for the team training leading up to semis and the games in particular. Worked with Emily particularly on like some monostructural work and things like that. And then we would go back and forth on programming and things like that. And then I was fortunate enough to go with you guys up to Granite Games. And then I was also there at the games as well. So we kind of just got to know each other a little bit through those training sessions and then going up there with you guys to semis and the games. And then just started to have more conversations and things like that. And then I would say, a month-ish after the games, Kelly, you kind of shot me a text and you were like, hey, like, I'm kind of interested, like, let's have a conversation. So that's kind of how it went from my perspective, at least. So.
Yeah, let's talk, Kel, let's just talk a little bit about the 2022 season, your experienced team. And I think the writing is between the lines right now, but we haven't actually said it. The goal is individual for Kelly this year. And let's talk about kind of how we got from team to now shifting the goal and the focus to individual.
Yeah. So last year before I had moved, I think my mindset was, okay, maybe I'll go individual, but I was also coming off an injury and decided to sign up for a marathon. So I was kind of just in the middle of moving cross country, training for a marathon, not really knowing, starting my career of, full-time nutrition, that once my marathon was over, I started with classes at Greater Heights. And then kind of started dabbling with some of the people that were being a little bit more competitive. And then Emily had finally come back from her maternity leave. And I don't think you kind of had in your mind that you were going to go team. So at this point, oh, now you're going to my dog all crazy. Calm down, Sarah. So at this point, I think I still had my mindset on, okay, maybe I'll. Sorry, she heard Birdie bark, and then she thinks Birdie's at the house. So I guess my mind was still set on maybe I'll go individual and try the open and see if I can make semis. But then, hold on.
For those listening and watching, we all have dogs. So
yeah, sorry guys. Okay, I think I can talk over them.
Yeah, that was.
But, I think my goal was just let's go to semis. I could maybe make it there as an indie and just kind of see what happens. But then once I kind of linked up with M, it was one of those where, damn, this would be really fun just to have a training partner and just kind of see where we go. And then Jordan Cook started kind of coming into the gym just sometimes to kind of train. And then had already been working out with Duncan, and it just kind of made sense for the four of us with where we all were in our life to go team, just knowing how big of a commitment it is to go individual. And it was just, I think, exactly what I needed to get back into CrossFit, because my season was cut short in 2020 or 2020 season, where our team had qualified for the games. And that was when we were doing super team. And I was so invested, but I was just so burnt out after that season that's kind of where my injury kind of sparked and why I kind of took a break from CrossFit and went into marathon training. So I'm just so fortunate that I did team. We were able to be super competitive. I got my feet wet again at the games. I think it's just kind of exactly what I needed going into this year, and just feeling like I can give my all going indie. And I just don't think I was able to give my all going indie last year with where I was in life.
Yeah. Did you know at any point in the season that for sure you wanted to go individual and that was going to be the next goal, or is it something that you kind of realized and thought about postseason?
So I honestly think after going team, like we had such a great run and it was an awesome experience. But I always felt like every other year that I've ever gone individual, so 2017, 2018, I went individual. I always did it for like a different reason. Like I felt like I was doing it to prove to maybe other people that I could go individual after maybe it could have looked like a fluke making it in 2016 as a team member. Like at that time, it was much easier to make it to the games with a team because there were 6 people and I was clearly going to be like the least experienced on that team. So I just felt like my 17-18 season, I was kind of doing it for the wrong reason. I wanted to prove to almost everyone else that I could do it. Mm-hmm. But in 2018 or 2017 was my first year indie. And that was like the first time I really believed in myself a little bit. I ended up 7th that year at regionals. So I gave everything of my life up in 2018. Like I felt like I deserved to make games. I trained my ass off. I was still teaching full time, but that was even felt like I was making the bigger commitment of getting there before school and after school. And I had my best open finish that year as well. So going into regionals, I just was so confident, and I wouldn't say I was just overtrained. It just wasn't my weekend. Like things didn't fall my way, but I just had such a sour, like thinking back on it now and how much more mature as an athlete I am now, I was so sour and felt like I deserved to make it in 2018 that I was almost pissed off that like, how did I not make it? So I just thought it was such an ugly quality that I had and walked around with at that time. So for going into this year, I just try to like make this the year, because it's, you know, hopefully starting a family after this year, but I just wanted this to be like a year for me, like proving it to me. And I think a lot of times with social media or having to go to certain competitions or trying to do all of these things, I would have maybe have done in the past to get the sponsorships or, you know, get the recognition or kind of getting validated for no reason other than just other people, strangers validating me. But like even now, you guys as my coaches too, like we've talked about this, just I said no to a competition that would have been probably good for me to go to because it wasn't fitting in with like the big picture goal that we have. And just that, like being able to say no to that, saying no to Wadapalooza, just kind of made me like really recognize that I'm doing this because I want to make games for me. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the first time I think that I really realized that I wanted to go individual. And it was more so I was doing it for the right reason, not just for anyone else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Tristan, now going to you kind of as her coach and kind of hearing that is the priority of making sure that the focus is it's done for her. And that's really important as far as training in the training environment. From a coaching standpoint, how are you helping kind of construct that environment and lead it in that direction and kind of think through those decisions?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and Kelly and I have had a lot of conversations about this, is a lot of our focus right now is giving her opportunities in her training to find kind of where the edges are in her capacity and her fitness, and also making sure that the process is an enjoyable one. It's a long season. Like, she's been part of the sport for a long time. Like, it's a grind. Everybody knows that. So understanding that our end goal is, making the games, taking that time right now to keep stressors low, make sure we're not overdoing things, and having a little bit more attention to detail in terms of the programming of, rather than throwing everything in the kitchen sink at her right now, let's take these opportunities and have pieces that are constructed to give her an opportunity to build some confidence in the fitness that she already has. I think just the way she is as an athlete coming off of team, some of her capacities lend really well to individual as well, but those weren't really expressed in a team setting. So helping her and myself learn where she's at with some of these more individual competitor qualities early on now. And also, to what she said with that competition, making sure that we're always kind of focused on the end goal and not getting distracted by, little carrots here and there and things like that. Making sure we have conversations about, okay, if we do this competition, how does that impact what we're doing here? Where does that fall in the season? I mean, we talked about this a little bit before, but we still don't know really all the details of things going on this year for individuals. So kind of protecting that end goal as what's most important, and then working backwards for everything we do from now until then.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned some out-of-season competitions and things, and one thing that we skipped over that I want to make sure we highlight is congratulations. We officially found out that you won the TFX online qualifier, which is a big deal. It's kind of one of your first outside of the Open, right, which was a year ago now. That's the first thing that you've done individually, because we did everything, all the other qualifying steps as a team. So that feels good. Outside of just that qualifier and stuff, is there any plans for anything outside of the CrossFit Games season so far this year?
So most likely going to do TFX. We had qualified, which is in Austin, the end of January. And I think that'll just be good to kind of have a live competition and see kind of where we're at there. And I think Tristan and I have even spoken about it's okay that I'm not going to be peak then. And I kind of talked about that a little bit in my 2018 season. I felt like I was so peaked for the Open that when I came time to regionals, I was so drained and kind of dead. Like I almost wanted the weekend to be over, even though I was at my fittest. So it was like a really weird mental time for me. So far that's kind of the only one that we have on our radar. Probably the only one we will do that I'm thinking.
Yeah, just with the way the season's kind of structured, right? Like the off-season competition time is kind of December, January, and then back, September, October, those places. So with you guys having such a long game season and then taking the time off you needed afterwards, kind of eliminated a little bit of that time to do those other off-season comps.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said and valuable for, obviously, if you do this competition, there's some individual experience for you as an athlete. But even though Tristan was there with us this previous season coaching, he hasn't gotten to see just you operate in competition, right? So there can be some really valuable learning and communication by figuring out when it's under stress and the clock is on and people in front, what you need from a coach to help execute and guide you. Tristan, you are planning to be down there at TFX, and we have some other people in team stuff competing as well. When it's coming up to an event like that, what part does the coach play in kind of helping that athlete through that weekend?
Yeah, so I think the big things, obviously, in a competition, number one, I always try to make sure do a good job of making sure the athlete's warming up, cooling down, and those things. I joke that even the most experienced athletes sometimes just get to competitions and forget what they're doing. Like they don't warm up properly. They don't, get in nutrition after events, carbohydrates, things like that. So kind of being like a little bit of a manager, like, hey, did you eat? Like we need to eat this, like do that, this, that, and the other, making sure we're warming up appropriately. And then the other thing that I personally do as a coach is I try to be the leaderboard psycho. And then I also try to be the one stalking all the other athletes on the floor. So then I can give valuable information on what we need to make happen in this workout, right? And I think the very high level coaches who have been around a long time do a good job of that. But I think that's something that's missed a lot with other coaches is, who do we need to beat for these points? Where do we stand in this event? Who's going to be somebody to watch on this event? And then the other thing that I really try to make an effort to do in competitions, and I look like a psycho when I'm doing it, is I try to provide as much information to my athlete as I can so they can work on their execution. So as an example, last year at TFX, there was a running D-ball workout. I was able to situate myself really close to the first turn going out on that run. And every time Jacob, who I was coaching at TFX that year, ran out on the run, I told him how long of a second lead he had on the next closest person, and something to think about while he's on that long run, right? Like relax, this, that, and the other, da, 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 blah, 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 whatever. So trying to provide information if my athlete can hear me and see me so that they know it adds to the information they have to execute a workout, rather than I'm just going as hard as I can because I don't know what's happening around me, right? And it's something with an athlete like Kelly, who has a lot of competition experience, that's something I plan on practicing leveraging. Now, obviously, every competition we go to, I may not have the ability to do that, depending on where coaches have to be placed. At the games, they had their little box where they had to sit and this, that, and the other. But I almost kind of think of it like the guy on the sidelines of the football field with the play cards. Like any information I can give, because I have a bird's eye view of the floor and she has this much view, maybe this much view, right? A lane or two. But it's so hard to have that full spectrum view of the floor when you're going as hard as you need to be to do well in competitions. So I try to do my best to deliver that information if the athlete's able to receive it, right? That's the other caveat to that. If somebody's blacked out, I'm not going to yell at them. It's not going to do any good. But so I'm excited to kind of practice those things. And I'm very excited to get the opportunity to do an in-person coaching athlete kind of system thing with her at TFX so that we can get some experience with that before we end up stepping on the stage at a semifinal.
Yeah, awesome. You kind of mentioned Jacob in there as well, who you also coach and has individual aspirations. Kel, let's chat about that just a little bit and chat about kind of what the training group and what the environment is that we're kind of working with here at HQ, which is CrossFit Greater Heights here in Houston, and what's important to you out of those training partners and environment.
Yeah, so I think you and I spoke right after games and kind of, I think every athlete kind of has some sort of doubt in themselves. And, you were like, you have to go individual, like you have to go. And my whole thing was like, yeah, I do believe in myself this year, but I also know how lonely that journey can be when you're going individual, especially if you're, you're not at a headquarters that has games athletes already or semifinal athletes already. So we're still pretty new, Ascend, and growing quickly, which is awesome. But I also knew that I was going to have to do something outside of class, or I was going to have to do more than just what class was doing, of course, if I have aspirations to make the games. And I just didn't want another lonely journey because, like I said before, I've done it. And I think that's a part of the wear and tear of being an individual. So we kind of set up a time, like around 1:00, and you don't have to be a semifinals athlete. You don't have to be an open athlete. It's really like I had, not saying I put together this group, but just kind of pulled those people together and just kind of set like little ground rules that are super important to me. And it's like no complaining, just everyone's outlet, just or like outlook is positive, even when it's really hard to be, and just kind of like leave life things like outside of the door. And I know that's something that is really hard to do. We all carry like work baggage, life baggage, etc. But I just wanted to make it something where when you're going to battle with people, we're really focused on the language that we're using. So if, Tristan, programs 6 minutes of rowing repeated 6 times, like, of course, none of us want to do that. And when you have to hold a certain pace, we know it's going to hurt, whether it's at that workout or any workout. Just there's such a different feeling when you guys are about to start that, when we can say like, oh, damn, we're about to get really fit from this, rather than like, this is going to suck, man. Like, this sucks so bad. And it's something that I know I try to work on all the time. I just had a conversation with Tristan after we had a really hard EMOM, and he said, well, I was proud of you. I thought you really gave it your all. And I said to him, like, I'm proud of myself too. I completed it, but I was so not proud of my attitude during it. And it's not that it's not going to hurt, but I was already shaking my head. He was looking at my monitor, and I'm kind of telling him like, I'm in trouble. And it's just those things I think a lot of people don't realize are the big picture. That's what makes like good athletes great, or good training environments even better. It's just kind of your attitude and like the gratitude that you get to have of being around people that are really like-minded. So we have a fun little crew that comes at 1:00, and and shoot the shit and bust each other's balls, and it's competitive, but at the same time, we all want each other to be the best that we can be. And I think that's where sometimes lines can get crossed when you have a certain training group with you. Is that sometimes that competitiveness can be, unhealthy, but at the same time, I think we've just found such a good balance. You kind of mentioned Jacob. He's, been training with us too. And I think he tries to keep tabs anytime he beats me, but I try to make it as little as possible. But it's all in good fun. But again, just good energy that we have, and I'm super fortunate for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Tristan, kind of hopping over to you and stuff with talking about this group, and everyone has their different kind of strengths and weaknesses and stuff. What is our approach to kind of programming for these different individual athletes that have individual aspirations, but we want to keep that environment to where they have training partners and have some group training available?
Yeah. So depending on the athlete, right, and if they're getting one-on-one coaching, or if they're doing one of our tracks, it looks a little different. But I can use Jacob and say Kelly as an example. They have different lifting, so their strength work is individualized, and then their metcons for the most part are the same, sometimes with some slight variation. And that variation is done in an attempt to make sure they're getting the desired stimulus and adaptations I'm looking for from that piece, but to allow them to have a competitive, time in the workout with each other, so that they get that competitive push, so to speak, because we know it's so valuable, especially with them being together a couple days of the week, for them to push each other, since strengths and weaknesses aren't the same for everybody, right? We have some people who come at that time who are really, really good runners, or they're really, really good on the machines or gymnastics. And so there's some little individual tweaks, sometimes made on the fly, to adjust the pieces a little bit for everybody. One, to make sure that they're getting the correct stimulus. So if somebody needs a little bit easier version, someone needs a harder version, but then also trying to structure it in a way where they're getting that competitive push from each other to make each other all better, even if there's just some slight differences in the workout they're doing. Sometimes her bar will be a little heavier, or sometimes Jacob will have a little bit more of a gymnastics movement on the rings maybe, or something like that. So just those really small individual adjustments, which is easy for me to make since I'm there, right? And I'm there and I'm able to make those adjustments on the fly, which is invaluable to me as a remote coach. Like, I love having my remote athletes and things like that. But if I had it my way, they'd all move to Houston. They'd all come to Greater Heights, and they'd all train with me and be able to have my eyes on them.
It is an open invite.
Yes. Anyone's more than welcome.
Here to, reach out. We can chat.
Come on down. And I think, something Kelly mentioned with that EMON piece, kind of that mindset going into it and staying in the fight, so to speak, to use a little bit of my Army talk from my previous life. A lot of my job, especially right now, and even more so maybe when the season really gets going and we get closer, is to put her in situations where that decision is made. Mm-hmm. Because making that decision in the moment is maybe the most important part of being successful on the competition floor, right? Especially in online qualifier events as well and things like that. So she was giving me a little bit of a hard time before that workout because I told her like 5 minutes before the workout, I added calories to her ski erg. And she was like, what? I was like, no, you can do it. And I knew she could, but I also knew that it would be at that position to where we'd have an opportunity to have that kind of mental talk with ourselves. And as a coach, for me, it's one of those things where I don't expect you necessarily to win that mental battle every day, but presenting her and other athletes with as many opportunities as possible to have that decision when it makes sense, then that's a big part of kind of my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, especially for an athlete like Kelly, who has been doing the sport for a long time, like what we have left as far as development and different skills and different weightlifting and whatnot are just kind of small drops in the bucket because she's been doing this for a long time. She's very talented, very refined, that the biggest gains really are kind of finding those ways to maximize kind of your potential. And a lot of that comes from those mental decisions that you're kind of talking about. Yeah. So Kel, let's kind of hand it over to you and kind of along those same lines. What's your focus in training right now to try to take your skill set and everything that you've worked to develop and kind of your experience from team last year and stuff and convert that into success as an individual athlete?
Yeah, as much as it's kind of, Tristan's getting to know me as an athlete, I'm still kind of getting to know me again as an individual athlete. It's been so long. So just my approach of different ways that I would maybe tackle a workout are really different than it would have been if I was going team. So for me, it's kind of just redeveloping like who I was as an individual, just because I had to morph into something else to fit a part of a team. But right now I'm just trying to see, where I can make up the most ground in certain workouts. And, I think doing the online qualifier recently for TFX, we just kind of talked about that, was just a good way to kind of see and go back to the drawing board of, oh, wow, I can really excel here. But, oh, wow, I didn't realize how much work we need to put in here, which is also really exciting too. We had a workout yesterday that Tristan and I talked about, and light power snatches are something that I actually don't really enjoy. And I guess he didn't know that either, but he saw it the other day. But
noted.
Even his approach to that was great. Now this is awesome. We have something that we can work on. This should be something you're excited about. So I'm just really, more than anything, just trying to enjoy the little wins that I get to have each day. That's kind of been like, this is probably the first time in a really long time where I'm looking at programming like a couple of days ahead of time. And I'm really excited about a piece that I'm going to see it's popping up on Friday or whatever day it might be. But I think that just comes so much along with the environment that I'm in. I did a post about it the other day, but I was like in the middle of a Metcon with the same people that are doing the same workout as me. And I just feel like I'm on a team where, one of the guys that we train with, his name's Kevin, and he just kind of joined our little crew for 1 o'clock. And like, you can barely hear it in the video, but I'm like kind of dying and starting to slow down in a movement that I would have. And, just hearing him be like, let's go, Kel. And it's just, I don't know. I just feel like I'm just surrounded by so many people that are really believing in me. And I'm just trying to execute on top of that in my training. So just trying to find my weaknesses, see where I can, make up some ground, but just making sure I enjoy it. I think we lost Tristan. I think we lost everyone. Hello?
And we're back.
Right.
I was like, I was on myself. I was like, I think I lost everyone.
It was a planned intermission, people. It was a planned intermission.
All right, Tristan, you were actually the next person I was going to go to, so I was like, oh gosh, we lost him. But one thing that I wanted to bring up and point out is that a lot of people don't realize that actually programming from a team athlete into an individual athlete is different. What the skill set that you want for those athletes, how it really does change, because the goal and the intent of driving adaptation in that training should be different. Can you talk just really quick about what a team athlete needs out of programming kind of versus what an individual athlete needs, and how we're kind of adjusting programming for Kelly to facilitate that transition?
Yeah, so from a team perspective, right, it's a lot more, I would say, anaerobic. We're doing a lot more sprint work, going unbroken things with a work to rest ratio to build into the workout in some capacity due to just, this pair going, that pair going, whatnot, things like that. For an individual athlete, it's a lot more, how can you not stop moving? Can you hear me?
Yeah, he was just a little bit fuzzy.
I was like, I don't know if I can hear you. I was like, I don't know if only I can hear you. There he goes. He's coming back. But I'm not really sure if any of that actually
was legible.
Yeah.
My mic is working. Can you hear me now?
You're just a little fuzzy on our end.
Yeah, it's just low connection. Okay, but I can hear you better now. So
the team side of that, right, is a lot more work to rest, kind of an anaerobic skew. Whereas when we're working with individual athletes, it's how can you complete this with as little rest as possible? How do we make this as aerobic as possible? So that you can stay moving. When you both smile, it makes me think something's wrong.
Then you know.
Yeah. You're like really, really, really glitchy. I like hear every other word you say.
Yeah, you're cutting out pretty bad. But basically, the basis of what Tristan is trying to get at is that from a team athlete standpoint, it's much more valuable to be really good at sprint recover, being able to do those larger sets, recover quickly so you can get back on for your team. Whereas adjusting that for an individual athlete, being able to turn any given Metcon into as aerobic as possible and stretch your capacity over longer durations of time, where you're operating just at that 80% level and never really ticking over to the max effort side of things and hanging out just right where it's comfortable most of the time. Or I shouldn't use the word comfortable, but possible to continue to sustain. You might be very uncomfortable within it. So it really is a difference in not only training and programming, but kind of mindset going into the workout. A lot of times with team, like you knew you could absolutely kind of empty the tank on that bike because your teammate was going to hop on after you and give yourself some rest. Whereas for an individual, you have to be a lot more mindful, and that athlete almost IQ becomes a lot more important of learning what's possible to kind of ride the line on that bike, because you have to go and make the quick transition to the next thing and responsible for yourself. So it does kind of illustrate a lot of different changes and focuses just from a programming kind of standpoint and how we're going to attack different workouts. I know that this is something that we've kind of talked about with you, Kel, a lot in kind of changing and making that transition. And one thing you've been working on is kind of letting go of the fear of what could happen in a workout and kind of running headfirst towards the wall and finding out instead of focusing on almost like perfect execution and staying just under the line of what's safe. So from you and your standpoint mentally, what does that look like in training? Like, what are you thinking in those moments?
Yeah, I think I used to take training a lot of times as if like, okay, I have this piece, we're about to do it. How would I do this if I was in competition? How would I go about tackling it? I would almost talk to the people I was training with, like, how would we break this up? But really, I've just learned more and more that I need to fall on my face more in training. So taking those like bigger risks, almost getting halfway through a workout and being like, same thing I just did with Tristan, like, oh no, I'm in trouble. But that's the only way you really learn, because, to really develop your capacity, you got to at least practice it. And it's not going to happen when you're on the competition floor. I actually feel like on the competition floor, unless you're in a qualifying position and you're right there, that you're less likely that you're going to kind of really shoot your shot, especially on like the first event of a competition. We're probably going to be a little bit more conservative, but to really even know what conservative is, we got to be able to practice what my threshold would be. So just more so with training pieces, I've been trying to scare myself a little bit more. It's really out of my character. I think I would say like a better individual athlete, because if I was to run a race, it's like the 800 meter. Whereas I feel like individual, sometimes you're a 100-meter sprinter. But I think now the more developed that individual is, or the individual, like to make a qualifying spot, you have to also be able to be a 100-meter sprinter in workouts too, or you just can't keep up. So I'm just trying to more, again, learn myself through training of biting off a little bit more than maybe I can chew, and just learning from that way. But sometimes I'm surprising myself. Like we did that muscle up capacity workout, and maybe in the past I would have tried to break it up, or if that was in competition, I would have maybe have been more conservative in fear that I would reach failure. But getting that win, I know I always talk about, I said it to you all the time, Em, but like putting cookies in my jar. Every time I get like one of those wins in training, it's just a way for me to put a cookie in my jar. So when I get to competition and I'm doubting myself, like I have the evidence that I can pull out of that jar that just proved to me, like, no, you're starting with 10 ring muscle ups. Like you can go unbroken to start, and we're not going to completely fall apart. So that's kind of just how I've been tackling training.
Yeah. I think that's a great mindset and outlook to have. And the reality too is, since the last time you've been an individual athlete, honestly, the game's changed a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I think back in 16, 17, if you had the skills and the strength to be able to pace the workout and game the workout perfectly, where your strengths and skills and kind of talent shined through, you could game workouts a lot more. Now that we're further in the progression of the sport, truthfully, everyone can do all the skills and everyone is strong. So it comes back down to more so capacity and who's willing to push that edge and kind of put those thoughts and what hurts behind them, and kind of work through that. So Tristan, let's pop over to you for a little bit and just chat about how you're working on that with your athletes, because it seems to be kind of a common trend with some of our athletes that we're trying to pull out, is letting go of the need to almost pace things perfectly.
Okay, before I start talking, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Give me a thumbs down if something happens. Yeah, so I think the first thing that we've tried to work on a lot is separating training from competing, right? Training, we want to find where we fail, because that's where the valuable information is, right? Like I want to know what you don't like to do. I want to know what you're not comfortable with. I want to know what set of what takes you to failure. I want to know what pace on a bike is unsustainable and things like that. And then the other side of that is detaching yourself from your scores. Like a score in a workout is not a measurement of your value as a human being or your value as an athlete, right? Like there's so many things that play into a workout: strengths, weaknesses, good days, bad days. Is it a Monday? Is it a Wednesday? Like how sore are you? How's your work? Like there's so many, we could come up with a list 20 or 30 items long probably that all play into how you may do in one workout. So helping shift the mindset to going to a place in this workout where I'm going to learn something and seeing where we need to improve or what I'm really good at and where I can make my money versus what you actually got on this workout versus what the score was. Like scores are great. Obviously it's a sport. We're going to have scores and that's part of it. But when we're training, like I would much rather somebody just fall apart at the seams in training. And it's like, well, okay, the first thing we learned is we can never do that strategy in a competition if these movements come up. Like that's what we learned there, right? But then on top of that, it's like, well, why'd you blow up? Was it your heart rate? Was it your grip? Was it your like pressing? Was your muscles fried? Were you just out of breath? Like, and those are things I always like walk around and ask them after a workout. Like after yesterday's workout, I asked Kel, I was like, grip, heart rate? Like what was it? And she was like, I don't know, I just don't like these things, right? And it's like, okay, well, cool. Well, here's some things like that you could do to make it more efficient, right? Like I was watching your movement in this, and like we have some things to work on here. So then that informs me moving forward with programming to put that movement in again so that we have opportunities to practice those things. And also it informs me on how the workout needs to be structured for that movement, right? Do we practice under a bunch of fatigue or not?
Yeah, Tristan, you kind of just touched on it, but you even said like, and you had asked the question like, what's my difference in my training, or what's my approach going to be that's like a little bit different? And just like you said, Tristan, I'm really not so much worried about my time or my score compared to other people. It's really like you said to me, what happened in that workout? Like, was it your grip? And I was just like, I don't know. And that's why that workout ate me, because a win for me in a workout isn't actually my time or my score. It's like, did I make the decision to go there? Like, I think that's the one thing as CrossFitters is we all know that every workout that you do, if it's challenging you, you'll get to a point where you have to make the decision of if you're going to like lean into discomfort or not. And every time I've learned that when I lean into a discomfort, when I do make the choice to say yes, no matter if someone smokes me in that workout, like I'm proud of myself in that. Where like, that's probably why I felt devastated yesterday when you came up to me and I'm like, it wasn't my grit, it wasn't my heart rate. That was a loss for me just in general, even though I didn't lose the workout, but it was just because I lost like what my goal was. And that's always going to be to like lean into the discomfort of training. And I always say like, we have a red line, not that you have to red line every day, but unless we're pushing that red line often in training, it's never going to move. And I always just say to myself, like when I'm making that decision in training of this is where it's like, I'm going to decide if I'm going to slow down or I'm going to make the EMOM or I'm going to push the score. It's like, I just tell myself like, we got to start moving that red line because that's the only way we're going to continue to get better. And I just thought that was interesting. Like we aren't worried about scores in training. We're really worried about like, what was the purpose of that workout, I think.
Right.
Yeah. For sure. I think kind of just along the same thing as what you guys are saying is we have all of these different skills within CrossFit. We have running and distance and all these gymnastic skills and strength and whatnot. But I also preach to my athletes that intensity is a skill too. Being able to express that intensity and choose and have that decision is something that needs to be practiced. If you're not choosing and practicing making that decision regularly to push to that red line, it's going to be a lot harder come game day to convince yourself that you're ready to make that decision. So that is definitely, I think, a skill that's so important to our sport. I think that's really the skill that sets apart the elite level athletes versus those that are trying to get to that level, is learning that the difference really is a decision made by you.
I think that's also where we kind of talked about earlier, choosing the language that you have in training with your training partners. Like if you're about to do a workout and you're like, oh, this is going to suck, it's really hard for you to like get that intensity up. But if you're like, I'm going to smoke you in a playful way, or I'm going to black out in this workout, like you're kind of convincing yourself that you can do it. So I think it's like, it's definitely a skill to be learned, but it's also a mindset or like kind of like a mantra that you get with your team or your training partners of like, yep, this is going to be one. And I think when you frame it that way, it just makes it easier to go. I don't know.
Hard is a good thing. We don't show up to do easy things.
Yeah.
Why would I waste your time?
Yeah.
Like it's interesting that like we're talking about this too, because you guys know like I'm super nerdy and nerd out on a lot of stuff. Like there's literally been scientifically shown effects of dopamine and things like that come from you keeping a positive outlook basically and leaning into that adversity that downstream in the body allows you to perform better physically. Like, so it's all very connected, and it's important.
Okay, we got about like 5 or so minutes before we're going to kind of wrap this up for the last thing. But since it's new in the news and stuff, let's get our quick kind of 5-minute thoughts. What do we think about new changes to the individual season and path? I'll let you guys kind of just jump in and talk about it together and kind of what the strategy for Kelly is to optimize some of these changes.
I think for me, I'm really excited about it. I'm excited that I'm on the West Coast, but west side, I guess, of the country. Yeah. But I think we knew the Open was just the first kind of hurdle. We don't want to be peaked for it. It's something that we're super confident that we'll make it to quarters. But with the new structure, we know that it's going to be more difficult to make it from quarters to semis as the pool's a little bit smaller. I mean, not as many semifinals, available. So there's only 2. But I think we're both confident enough in my ability to get us there. And then I think that it plays well in my favor that there might be more game spots potentially. We don't really even know that even yet, but if there is, I think that'll make it a lot more exciting for even viewers, for athletes, that, if you have 10 spots, that if you're taking an 18th compared to a 25th in a workout, that really matters. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I think it would just be kind of fun for everyone involved to see, points are really going to matter overall. At least that's my kind of take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say from a coaching perspective, not with the information we have right now, nothing of my priorities has changed, right? We are training with the goal of making the games and having a outstanding performance at semis to give us the best shot to do that. I think the way they're doing this strength of field thing is interesting. I am curious to see the calculations and things like that on it and how they divvy those things up, because I think right now there's way more questions than answers. But even knowing that in some quantifiable way, Open performances, add to this metric and therefore help determine additional spots at a semifinal, like, I think that's an interesting way to do it. And I think that it could be good. It might be flawed, but from a coach's perspective, the way we qualify is still the way we qualify. We make quarters, we make semis, and then we make the games. So the Open still for, yourself, in my eyes as a coach, is very much one really, really good effort at the beginning of our training day, and we're moving on because we have bigger fish to fry down the road. So unless they come out and there's some kind of crazy way where like each individual athlete can raise their strength of field by a whole bunch to get more spots, then maybe it's like we have a conversation about like, hey, this is a wheelhouse workout for you. Like, let's do it again and like pad some. But like right now with the amount of information we have and just kind of the way, I don't want to get too nerdy with it, but like depending on how they do the statistics and like strength of field and all these calculations and the sample size, like it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to really change our approach from what we would have done if the season structure had been the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, we're still waiting on all those details and stuff to refine those paths and those decisions. But yeah, just want to touch on that a little bit. Okay. Last question that I wanted to kind of ask was for Kelly. And I wanted to touch on the fact that you're here at CrossFit Greater Heights in Houston. We have some younger athletes, female athletes that are a part of Ascend, that have games aspirations, that train on site and remote. My daughter's in the gym every day with you, and I know she looks up to you I'm excited for the day that she really gets to kind of know what it means to be kind of these strong athletic women and stuff. If you were to give one piece of advice to a younger female athlete in the sport that wanted to be in the position that you were in one day, what would you say?
I would say surround yourself with the right people. I always just felt like if you're the best one in the room, then you're in the wrong room. That's with anything in life. If you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. And just kind of seeing the potential to grow and having that around you is super contagious. But I also just think it's like surrounding yourself with people that are going to believe in you. And that's another thing, like with anything that you're going to do in life. I've hit like almost my max potential in anything that I've tried at times when I've been with people that made me believe in myself more than I thought that I could. And I'm super grateful that I've grown up with parents that have been that way. And, I now have a coach that feels that way and teammates that feel that way. But I guess just in general, I don't even want to just like narrow it down to females, because I do love that our sport has just expressed this acceptance that it's probably the only sport that's most respected from the female and the male side. But just in general, like no matter what it's going to be, I truly think like when you're with good company, the ceiling is so much higher and the journey is so much more fun. So yeah, I would just say, make sure you're not the best one in that room, and make sure you have people that believe in you, because I know, especially in this sport, the comparison game is so high. It's still so high for me. And I've been in it for a really long time. I'm always going to be looking at, what does that girl have that I don't have? But just kind of recognizing that, there's going to be wins, there's going to be losses. But if you just like put your full heart in something, and just know that the journey is pretty long, you really are capable of doing anything. And I love like the saying when I was in college or soccer, and it's like, that other girl puts her shoes on the same way you do. Like, you both have the same opportunity. It just, you get to make that decision every day with the choices that you make. And that's pretty empowering if you kind of frame it that way. But boys or girls, I think just being around the right people is the way to go.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. We're going to kind of wrap it up here, but just wanted to say thank you both for joining me. It is Thursday, so that we're recording. So finish enjoying your rest day, but I'll see you tomorrow. And work. We keep going. So, okay. Thanks again. If you want more information, make sure that you are following us on our social channels at Ascend Athlete, and you can also follow Kelly. I will link her Instagram handle on our post, and follow her journey this year as she heads towards the CrossFit Games as an individual in 2023. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.